On the night of August 3rd, 1928, a figure climbs the north wall of the Miskatonic Library. Reaching the second floor, it forces a window, hauls itself over the sill, and enters the room where the university keeps its most precious volumes. At the far end, behind glass, lies the book it has come to take. The alarm tears the guard from his desk. Before he can reach the stairs, the university dog breaks away from him and bounds toward the upper floor. Its claws strike the steps, the barking recedes down the corridor, and then everything overlaps. Breaking glass, an overturned table, a blow heavy enough to shake the ceiling. The dog lets out a cry. After that, the library falls silent. The guard does not go up alone. He telephones Henry Armitage, the library director, who lives near the campus and arrives a few minutes later with two colleagues, Warren Rice and Francis Morgan. Lamp in hand, the three men follow the blood trail to the rare books room. The smell reaches them before the light does, acrid, animal, so strong that they stop on the threshold. The dog lies against a shelf, its jaws covered in yellow-green fluid. Near the open window, a man is still twisting on the parquet floor. He is nearly 8 feet tall and, despite the August heat, wears a coat buttoned to the neck. The struggle has torn the cloth across his belly and legs. Armitage lowers his eyes, sees what the clothes had hidden, then turns the lamp away. He knows the intruder. A few months earlier, this same man had spent hours at a table in the reading room, bent over a Latin volume from the collection. Wilbur Whateley, from the village of Dunwich, cared only for a few lines in the middle of page 751, lines missing from the incomplete copy he kept at home. The volume is still in its case, behind cracked glass. The Necronomicon. On the parquet floor, Wilbur moves his lips. Armitage bends close enough to hear a run of unknown syllables, broken by a name he recognizes. Yog Sothoth. Outside, the whippoorwills suddenly answer one another in the campus trees. Their calls follow the dying man's breath, quickening with it, spacing out as he weakens. In Dunwich, people say those birds gather around the dying to catch the soul as it leaves the body. His breathing stops before dawn. In the branches, the calls break off all at once, then the whole flock flees over the roofs. Wilbur, meanwhile, begins to lose his shape. The skin collapses around a soft mass that nothing seems able to support. The fluid spilled between the floorboards thickens and darkens. When the sun finally enters through the broken window, there is almost nothing left to carry away. Wilbur Whateley is only 15 years old. In the Dunwich Register, his life first occupies 3 lines. Born at 5 in the morning, Sunday, February 2nd, 1913. Mother, Lavinia Whateley. Father, unknown. No doctor signs the certificate. The address points to an isolated farm beneath Sentinel Hill. To reach Dunwich from Arkham, the road sinks between rounded hills, wooded all the way to their summits. The turnoffs are not always marked. Farms vanish behind the trees, and as the valley narrows, only the sound of the river keeps travelers company. Sentinel Hill dominates that tangle of roads. Near its crest, a broad slab rests on smaller blocks. The locals do not know who raised it, but they know that on certain dates fires burn all around it, and the earth groans beneath the stones, even when the sky stays clear. The Whateley farm stands just below. Lavinia lives there with her father, an old man seen mostly when he comes to buy cattle or order books. Very near-sighted, albino, more at ease in the hills than under other people's eyes, she scarcely leaves the property during her pregnancy. On the morning of the birth, Her father calls neither midwife nor doctor. He waits for daylight, then goes to the store and simply announces that the child is named Wilbur. As the child is born, dogs bark from one farm to the next, while a rumbling moves through the hills. When asked who the father is, old Whateley answers that one day Lavinia's child will call that name himself from Sentinel Hill. No one learns anything more. The mystery of the father is soon overtaken by a fact impossible to hide. The newborn grows at a speed nothing can explain. At 3 months, Wilbur is the size of a 1-year-old. He walks before the end of summer, speaks before his first birthday, and by September 1914 already overtops children twice his age. His grandfather has to enlarge his clothes almost every week. Closed shirt, long trousers, heavy shoes, nothing shows, even in the hottest part of summer. When he approaches, dogs strain at their chains until they choke, plough the dirt in front of fences, or hurl themselves against doors. In time, people recognize the boy's arrival by the uproar that precedes him. As Wilbur grows, the farm changes with him. Old Whateley buys cows, without the herd ever becoming larger. The animals seen again in the pasture quickly waste away. Some carry small circular wounds on the neck or flanks, and their skin looks bloodless beneath the hair. The deliveries continue, sometimes twice in the same week, always led around to the back of the house, where a new ramp rises to the upper floor. The first time neighbors notice that ramp, they watch the hill from the road on Halloween night. A fire burns around the slab on Sentinel Hill. Old Whateley stands near the flames. Behind him, Lavinia clutches her child. Each time the old man lifts his arms, a dull vibration rises from the ground and rolls through the valley. By morning, black marks cover the stones. At the farm, the upstairs windows have disappeared under boards. The work never really stops. First, old Whateley knocks down the bedroom partitions. Soon the attic follows, then a chimney, then part of the floor. Outside, he widens the upper door and reinforces the ramp. The house keeps its facade, but inside it is gradually emptied, as if ordinary rooms were giving way to one immense volume. Behind the walls, something rubs against the wood. At times, a slow breath makes the downstairs windows tremble, and the smell escaping through the cracks hangs around the building for hours after the cattle have passed. Wilbur now helps his grandfather. At 10, he is taller than most men in the village, and already wears the face of an adult. His voice is deep, his movements measured. He collects the books from the post office, and whenever some curious neighbor lingers near the house, he takes his place in front of the ramp. His coat never opens, not even while he works. Lavinia, by contrast, begins seeking other people's company. At the store, whenever someone agrees to listen, she talks about her son, about what he reads, about the things he seems to know without her ever having taught them to him. Her words remain disjointed, but a very clear fear runs through them. She is afraid of Wilbur. More than that, she is afraid of what is growing above her room. Then she catches herself, lowers her voice, and returns home before nightfall. At the beginning of August 1924, old Whateley falls ill. Dr. Houghton climbs to the farm on Lammas evening and finds a house attuned to 2 separate breaths. The first comes from the old man lying in his bed. The other descends from upstairs, deeper, powerful enough at times to lift dust between the ceiling boards. In the trees, the whippoorwills follow the dying man's breath and fall silent whenever he comes back to himself. Wilbur bends close to the bed. His grandfather orders him to open still more space, Upstairs, the growth is accelerating, and the walls will not hold much longer. The presents must be fed regularly, and above all, must not be allowed out before the appointed time. Then the old man asks for the English copy of the Necronomicon kept in the house. His hand searches for a page that is no longer there. In a complete edition, he explains, Wilbur will find on page 751 the formula needed to open the passage. He recites the first words, breaks off in the middle of a syllable, and dies before he can begin again. The birdsong dies away. A few seconds pass. The whole flock stirs again, leaves the trees, and scatters above the hill. Wilbur watches them go without emotion. To him it means only one thing. The old man's soul has escaped them. After the burial, the ramp is lengthened and new partitions fall. Lavinia occupies the few rooms still habitable until the autumn of 1926. As Halloween approaches, she tells a neighbor that she does not want to remain alone at the farm. She is seen one last time on the grounds, not far from Wilbur. By morning, she is gone. No letter, no trace in the woods, no body gives any clue whether she fled or whether something kept her from leaving. Wilbur does not report her disappearance. The following year, he removes the last divisions from the ground floor and carries the furniture into a shed. He no longer truly lives in the house. He watches it, brings food for its occupant, and works every night over his grandfather's books. The interrupted formula remains his only obstacle. The Whateley copy is an English translation attributed to John Dee, an old and damaged volume missing several leaves. Wilbur writes to the few institutions that possess a complete version: Harvard, the British Museum, the National Library of France, and a collection in Buenos Aires. None agrees to send out so precious a book. That leaves the Miskatonic Library in Arkham, close enough for him to appear there in person. Henry Armitage receives him during the winter of 1927-1928. Wilbur is not yet 15, but the man who crosses the threshold has to bend his head under the lintel. The black coat, the closed collar, and the gloves draw still more attention because the room is heated. At the end of the corridor, the university dog sniffs the air, growls, then hurls itself against the bars of its pen. Armitage lays Olaus Vermius's Latin edition on a table. Beside it, Wilbur opens his English volume, crowded with tight annotations, and goes straight to the passage he seeks. He reads quickly to page 751. There, his finger slows, returns to each line, and compares the two versions. The text describes beings that exist outside the dimensions available to sight, present around every place without wholly belonging to ours, and names Yog-Sothoth as the gate, the key, and the guardian of the threshold. Those presences remain invisible, but they leave behind a smell and force matter to bend when they pass through it. Wilbur copies several lines, goes back over the most difficult signs, and begins again. Passing behind him, Armitage glimpses the notes crowding the margins of the English copy: dates, quantities of blood, phases of the moon, the successive dimensions of a room being enlarged. The numbers form the methodical record of an experiment already underway. When he is ready to leave, Wilbur asks to take the Latin volume with him. Armitage offers to let him consult it again under supervision. The book itself will not leave the room. The young man insists without raising his voice. He needs the original in Dunwich, not a copy, and he cannot explain why. Armitage does not yield. Wilbur closes his coat, gathers his papers, and leaves under the gaze of the dog still struggling behind its bars. That same evening, Armitage writes to the other libraries. He describes Wilbur, summarizes his request, and asks them to block any loan in the Whateley name. The institutions confirm that they will follow the instruction, and the months pass without incident. On the night of August 3rd, the Miskatonic alarm rings. On the floor of the rare books room, the clothes torn away by the dog no longer hide what Wilbur had concealed since childhood. The head and hands retain a human appearance. Below the neck, every resemblance comes apart. Thick skin, folded in places and scaly in others, wraps a torso far too broad. Lower down, patches of black fur cover the hips. The legs bend like hind limbs and end in wide pads. Around the abdomen, supple appendages still contract. Some bear small mouths, others rudimentary eyes that react to the lamp. The yellow-green fluid runs from those wounds. As it drains away, the body collapses for lack of a skeleton able to support it. The tissues mingle on the parquet floor, blacken on contact with the air, and vanish within hours. The face resists longer. When it too fades, Armitage can no longer question the man who wanted the Necronomicon. What remains to him is the farm in Dunwich and the papers found in the pockets of the coat. County officers go to the Whateley place a few days later. The pastures are abandoned, the last cows near collapse. No sound comes from the outbuildings, but the house seems to vibrate behind its boarded windows. No sooner have the men reached the yard than a shock runs through the frame. Shingles lift and fall back. Something scrapes the inner face of the wall with enough weight to bow the boards. The smell noted in the Necronomicon floods the air. The officers leave without opening the door. They do, however, carry away everything they find outside the house. The books stored in the shed, account ledgers, and Wilbur's diary. The diary appears unusable. Its pages are covered with signs that belong to no alphabet known to Armitage. He soon understands that this is not a foreign language, but a code Wilbur built to conceal English. Each symbol corresponds sometimes to a sound, sometimes to a group of letters. Its value changes according to its place in the word. The work occupies Armitage, Rice, and Morgan for several weeks. Tables spread across the room, hypotheses accumulate and collapse until September 2nd, when a series of repetitions brings out a first sentence. From then on, the rest gives way in fragments. Between growth records and cattle accounts, Wilbur speaks of the one upstairs. A note, dated November 1916, states that the being hidden in the house is growing even faster than he is. Ordinary sight cannot grasp it, but two methods can give it a passing form: the Voorish sign and a powder called Ibn Ghazi. The blood of the animals feeds it, while giving it enough substance to press on the floor, move the walls, and remain in a world to which it only partly belongs. The final pages reveal the whole design. With the complete formula, Wilbur means to widen the passage once opened on Sentinel Hill and admit the beings named in the Necronomicon. The creature locked in the farm is meant to help him break open the threshold. Unable to reproduce by itself, still bound to Dunwich, it waits for its brother to finish the work. The true invasion would follow, extinguishing all earthly life before tearing the earth out of its place in space. Armitage then returns to the dates. Since Wilbur's death, No one has approached the farm. No cart has brought a cow. No man has climbed the ramp. The being whose growth the diary describes has been shut inside for a month, in a house too narrow for it, without receiving a drop of blood. While Armitage gathers the formulas capable of making it visible, the walls begin to give way. On the night of September 9th, a dry storm stalls over Dunwich. The thunder does not come from the sky. It rises from the ground in long tremors, and dogs answer it from one end of the valley to the other. Shortly after 2 o'clock, the Whateley house bursts open. Shingles fly across the pasture, sections of wall crash down on the ramp, and then one last effort throws the frame outward. Whatever lived inside frees itself from the ruins and goes down toward the woods. By dawn, the creature is already hiding among the trees. Behind it, a black substance, thick as tar, covers the debris, and continues through the grass as footprints as broad as barrels. Several rays extend from each mark. Their number changes from one step to the next. Between them, the ground sinks under the passage of a mass that breaks through fences, lays posts flat, and opens among the young trees a gap wider than a barn. In the pasture, the last cows lie drained of blood. The trail plunges into Cold Spring Glen, a ravine so deep that sunlight never quite reaches its floor, then disappears under the brush. The men from the neighboring farms stop on the ridge. Below them, branches move, though the air is still. A smell rises between the trees. No one goes down. The following night, Elmer Fry's cattle begin to howl. Something forces the stable, crushes several cows against the partitions, and leaves the others bloodless, marked with the same round wounds as the Whateley herd. The house is still standing. Fry decides to evacuate his family the next day, but the presence returns before they can leave. Because many Dunwich homes share the same telephone line, several neighbors hear his call. At first, Fry describes the barn. The walls are moving, he says, although he sees nothing in the yard. His voice pulls away from the receiver. A window shatters, beams crack, and then a continuous breath covers everything else. He calls for his wife. The line goes dead. When the neighbors reach the property, the house and barn are crushed into the ground, as if an immense weight had settled on them. The black tar still shines on the stones. No bodies appear beneath the wreckage. The tracks climb back toward Sentinel Hill, circle the great slab among the ashes of old fires, then descend again toward Cold Spring Glen. In Arkham, Armitage follows this progress through the calls reaching the university. Wilbur's diary lets him understand the pattern. Starving, the presence seeks blood. Each time it regains enough strength, it returns to the place where old Whateley prepared the passage. Armitage copies the banishing formula, reconstructs the Voorish sign, and, with rice, prepares the powder of Ibn Ghazi. Morgan checks the translations word by word. One mistake in pronunciation, one omitted line, and they will climb the hill without the means to close what they have made visible. The newspapers, meanwhile, speak of an illegal still that supposedly exploded in the woods. That explanation lasts less than a day. The following Friday, 5 state policemen enter Cold Spring Glen. Their car remains on the road with its doors open, and none of them comes back out. When the 3 men from Miskatonic arrive in Dunwich shortly after 1 o'clock, They find a village no longer waiting for an explanation. The residents close their shutters, move their animals, and watch the ravine from the heights. Armitage refuses to send anyone in search of the policeman. The diary is explicit. Weapons cannot strike matter that is not entirely in the same space as they are. The powder can fix its outline for a few seconds. The formula can break its anchorage. Nothing guarantees that either will work, but they are the only means available. The three academics spend the night in a house near the road. Through the closed windows, Rice hears the whippoorwills answering one another from one slope to the next. From time to time, a tree cracks at the bottom of the glen. The sound advances, stops, then starts again farther off. The presence does not leave the woods. It is waiting for the storm gathering above the hills. The next day, shortly before noon, every dog begins to bark at once. A line appears in the tops of the trees, like the wake of a boat. Branches bend, rise again, and then the next ones part in turn. The thing comes out of Cold Spring Glen in full daylight and heads toward the Bishop farm. Seth Bishop is already on the telephone when his neighbors pick up on the shared line. Something is crossing his pasture, he explains, but the word something is all he can say of it. The grass is flattened several yards wide. A fence bursts apart without any body appearing between the boards. The children can be heard behind him. Then the ground carries a shock into the neighboring houses. Bishop drops the receiver. His voice recedes. The roof gives way, and the line remains open on a dull rumble. From the road, dozens of witnesses follow the movement. The small wooden bridge bows beneath an invisible weight, groans almost to the point of breaking, then slowly rises again once the load has passed. Farther on, young trees lean in the same direction. Everything leads toward Sentinel Hill. Armitage hands out field glasses and asks the villagers to stay at the foot of the slope. Rice carries the powder sprayer. Morgan keeps the Necronomicon leaves under his coat, shielded from the first drops of rain. Together, they leave the road and enter the flattened grass. The climb follows the rhythm of tracks that seem to form almost under their eyes. A stone tips over. A bush is pressed flat. Then the next print opens higher up. Deprived of food for several weeks, the creature moves slowly, but each step shakes the slope. Halfway up, the smell becomes so strong that Morgan has to cover his mouth with his sleeve. Rice readies the sprayer. Armitage signals him to wait. They have only one supply of powder, and they must cover the whole mass. Ahead of them, the invisible thing reaches the circle of stones. The long grass lies down around the slab, as if pressed by an enormous belly. Several blocks roll aside. The sky takes on a violet tint above the crest, while the rest of the valley remains gray under the storm. Rice opens the valve. The first cloud crosses a few yards of open air and stops against a surface that nothing had revealed a second before. The powder clings to it, spreads, sketches one curve, then another. Little by little, a grey mass appears around the slab. It fills almost the entire summit, a swollen volume larger than a house, its outlines rippling like a soft egg. Long cable-like limbs emerge from the body, coil around the stones, and plunge back into the flesh. At ground level, Dozens of short legs sink into the earth. Between them, open, wet eyes and round mouths, extended by trunks that probe the air. Beneath the translucent skin, blue and violet rings contract to the rhythm of an invisible circulation. Then, the powder catches a face, never quite complete. A pale forehead forms on one flank, 2 red eyes appear higher up, and a few white strands drift in the membrane. The features slide, separate, and return elsewhere. But the villagers, watching from the road, recognize what the Whateley family has passed on to its children. The grey film is already beginning to scatter. Armitage traces the sign indicated in the diary. Morgan opens the leaves protected under his coat, and all 3 begin the formula. At the first sequence of words, the creature rises. Its limbs strike the circle of stones. Beneath their feet, a rumble descends into the hill and runs through the valley to the houses. Several mouths pronounce the name Yog Sothoth together. The sound begins so low that it blends with the thunder, then climbs, breaks, and searches for a human voice. 2 English words finally emerge. The being calls to its father and asks for help. Armitage continues without lifting his eyes. Rice and Morgan repeat each phrase, while the violet sky seems to tighten above the circle. A white light then passes through the mass revealed by the powder, without casting the slightest brightness on the men or the stones. For a few seconds, the whole crest deforms. The slab, the bodies, the horizon bend as though seen through thick glass. The air cracks, and the powder falls back onto empty space. The rumbling remains beneath Dunwich, weaker and weaker, then dies. Around the circle, the grass yellows before their eyes, and several whippoorwills fall from the trees. The trail ends at the foot of the slab. The rain slowly dissolves the smell without revealing the least body. Armitage waits until the sky regains its color before descending. The villagers come to meet them at the foot of Sentinel Hill. Many have seen the shape through their field glasses, and none asks anyone to describe it. Armitage then explains what Wilbur's diary had hidden from the beginning. On the morning of February 2nd, 1913, Lavinia did not give birth to 1 child, but to 2. Wilbur had enough human traits to live in daylight, learn to speak, travel to Arkham, and enter a library. His twin remained at the farm, invisible to ordinary eyes, fed on blood, while its body gradually gained purchase on the world. The ramp leads to the second son. For him, old Whateley boarded the windows, tore down the partitions, and enlarged the house as the body outgrew the rooms. In his final minutes, it is still that son he orders Wilbur to feed. After Lavinia's disappearance, the 2 brothers carry on the project alone. One locked inside the farm, the other searching through books for a way to open the passage for him. On the hill, the face revealed by the powder bears the red eyes and white hair of the Whateleys. Armitage chooses his words carefully. Of the 2 twins, Wilbur is simply the one who looks least like their father. 15 years earlier, old Whateley had promised that a child of Lavinia would call that father from Sentinel Hill. The whole valley has just heard it. In the following weeks, the authorities clear the ruined farms and close the approaches to Cold Spring Glen. The 5 policemen are never found, neither is Lavinia. The autumn rain eventually washes the black matter from the stones, but nothing grows around the circle at the top of the hill. Armitage recommends dynamiting the slab, pulling down the old alignments, and burning Wilbur's diary
as soon as the investigation is closed. At Miskatonic, a carpenter replaces the second-floor window and the floorboards soaked by Wilbur's body. The Necronomicon is then returned to the rare books room. The display case is fitted with a new lock. Inside, the Latin volume lies closed, exactly where it had been before the break-in.